Hello, nerds!
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 Well, hello, nerds.
Adam Christensen, welcome to the Nerd Zone, sir. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. You know what? This just made my day so much better. I didn't know what to expect, and all of a sudden I'm getting to yell about nerds. I'm happy. It's a good day.
That's right. That's right. You can, when you're on the campaign trail later this afternoon, just yell that from time to time, and it'll
I think
spice
some
up
people
the day.
maybe a little weirded out, but you know what? I think I'm going to do it. I just want to see the reactions. Actually,
Yeah,
that would
you
be
know,
fun.
if you go like maybe you if you're kind of canvassing around like a Dungeons and Dragons store or a bookstore,
That's typically where they put the polling locations, if I remember correctly.
you will find a couple. Yeah, there you go. They'll be rolling the multi-sided dice. So, well, I know it's a really important time for you and your campaign for Congress, and congratulations on the endorsement from both Andrew Yang and Marianne Williamson, the sort of 1-2 punch. That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Before we get into like the campaign, let's start with your background. So tell us a little bit about your kind of life journey.
Yeah, so I graduated with a degree in biology, a minor in chemistry. So I'm a little bit of a
Man of science.
Yeah, one of them.
I love it.
Right after I graduated, I basically did a road trip across the country looking for the best place to start a company. I kind of had two options. One was to go to Hawaii, try to get a PhD and study dolphins, or the other one was gonna try to start a company somewhere, and I definitely made the wrong choice. And so basically drove across the country, went from Virginia to Indiana to Tampa, grabbed a buddy, drove to Arkansas, worked as a little bit of a lumberjack for a couple of weeks to make enough money to make it out to California. Got to California, worked there for a little bit, made it to North Dakota, and then all the way back down here and ended up in Gainesville, Florida. Started the first company, and basically just catching fraud. So people were buying like oils, like peppermints and lavenders and stuff from people overseas, and they were fake, and they didn't know, and they were getting screwed over and paying like 2 or 3 times what they were supposed to. And basically just set up shop, analytical laboratory, and started making sure that protect small family-owned businesses from getting taken advantage of by international suppliers. And so that's kind of what I started as. And then about 1.5 years later, I started another company that was basically doing safety testing. So like pesticides, heavy metals. So the first one was basically making sure people didn't get screwed over. And the second one was making sure they didn't die from getting screwed over. And so that's kind of what I was doing right before I jumped into this race. And yeah, that's the life journey.
Wow. I love it. So you were in the business of bringing truth to scientifically proven truth to a lot of people trying to take advantage of other folks. That's
Pretty
great.
much, yeah. It's been fun. Honestly, it's the same thing. It's the same thing you're supposed to do in politics, right?
In theory.
Pretty close.
In theory, you would hope that some of that happens from time to time. I saw from your bio that there was also a interaction with the law enforcement at one point in a soccer game. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was. So I coach high school soccer. I also coached some in college as well. I've coached the UF women's club team here, University of Florida women's club team here. I was coaching a high school team. We were undefeated on the season. It was our final game of the season. And we were down at a place about 2 hours south of Gainesville. And all of a sudden, 2 police officers show up. And one guy points at my assistant coach and is like, "That's him." And I'm like, "What's going on? This kid's 19. He's Brazilian. And like, he has literally been with me all day because we drove the church vans down." And so they came for him. And then I was in the way, and I was like, no. And then the guy pointed at me as well and was like, him as well. And so basically started getting taken off the field. And this is in front of like 200 people. Like it's a championship game. And, basically, apparently I walked too fast, or then I walked too slow. And then I was apparently talking too much. And then I went the wrong direction towards the church van. Next thing I know, we're walking out of the actual stadium, and one of the police officers basically yells at me, "I'm sick of your shit," grabs me, throws me against the fence. Other one comes around me, punches me in the balls. I end up on the ground with my arm underneath me because I'm in pain. And so they said that I was resisting arrest, threatened to tase me. All of a sudden, I'm in the back of a police car. I've got handcuffs on. I spend the night basically in a private prison. I have to go through the entire process. Police officers lie on the report multiple times, and eventually it basically just gets thrown out. And so I kind of got the full thing of, all of it. And, I learned some fighting techniques while in the holding cell for how to break somebody's rotator cuff. I did enjoy that. That was interesting to me. But yeah, it was an experience, and it cost me about $3,500. And I know that, if that can happen to me, coaching a Christian high school soccer team in Florida, it's happening to a ridiculous amount of people who, number one, can't afford for it to happen to them. And number two, most of the time, nobody sees any of that. And so it was just really an eye-opener for me as far as criminal justice goes, because you hear about it, you read about it, and until it actually happens to you, you actually physically have no idea what it's like. And so I'm ashamed to say that for me, it didn't matter as much until it actually happened to me. But yeah, so it's I've had a lot of life experiences. The first company I started, I had $3,000. And after about a month and a half, I had 68 cents. And I thought I was going to be on the street and survive. So it's you have to have these life experiences, I think, to be able to know what's wrong and also how to fix it. And I think that people, not just me, but the people on our team and our campaign have gone through a lot of things. And especially being young, we know what's broken. Somebody's got to fix it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you mentioned that it cost you a few thousand to go through that. Was that mainly for legal fees?
Yeah, lawyer fees.
Yeah.
So about $3,500 is, I think, by the end of it, what it actually cost me. And that was actually, how do I put this? That was the friend's discount, because I knew a guy who is a very prominent lawyer here in Gainesville. And so, he was able to, help me out with it. But at the same time, most people don't have that kind of money and don't have that kind of connections and relationships with people. And it's just, if that happens to me, and I am, I'm pretty lucky with who I am. And I know for a fact it's happened to way more people.
What do you think would have happened if you didn't have the money to find a really effective lawyer? I mean, I guess you could have relied on the public defense program. That saying, you get what you pay for. A lot of times that just happens to be pretty true. And so I know that, number one, it would not have been taken care of as quickly as it was. Number two, we wouldn't have been able to put as much of a fight. I wasn't able to sue the police officers. I wasn't able to sue the guy that did it because of qualified immunity. There are so many things that prevent people from actually being held accountable when they're in a position of power when they should be. And so, those are a couple of things that have to change, cash bail bond. If I didn't have the money to make bond, I'd be stuck in there until trial or until, something else happened. And so it's effectively a debtor's prison at that point. The actual private prison that I was at, when they run out of beds, they actually, during the summer, they set up basically tents in the courtyard and try to fill as many of them as they possibly can, because they get paid based on how many people are there per night. Yeah. Yeah. The incentives are definitely a little odd there. What happened? Were they looking for another soccer game by a white male Christian coach?
Yeah. Well, apparently somebody who was on another team that we had previously beat didn't like us very much. And so they basically called the cops to try to...
They swatted you almost.
Pretty much, yeah. So they tried to say that my assistant coach was dangerous because they thought he was Mexican. He actually was speaking Portuguese, but they couldn't tell the difference. And yeah, so that was fun.
Oh, man. It's so... what's interesting is a lot of people think that the police are particularly tough on black males, frankly, right? And you don't fit that profile, and you got taken down and punched in the and the jewels.
Unfortunately, I think, I've thought about this a lot. If I didn't look the way that I am, if I didn't weigh 130 pounds, it wouldn't have been a threat to be tased. I probably would not be alive. Like, that's just, I mean, honestly, let's just be 100% honest. If I was a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger, and I did not look the way that I do, it would have ended much worse. And like I said, I'm very lucky to be who I am and look the way that I do. And literally, I could not, I couldn't resist arrest even if I wanted to. Let's put it that way. But, you know, that's another charge that just is absolutely insane to me, is the fact that you can be arrested for, quote, resisting arrest non-violently. Like, I don't even know how that works. I don't know what that means. But apparently that is just something that they can throw on as an extra charge. And you can now have to pay more in bond and have to deal with more legal issues because of it. And it's not even a real charge. It's not even a real thing. And so it's just one of those extra things that, you know, they've been protected by doing. And they know that, you know, if there's an altercation or they do anything, if they throw that on there, they're protected.
Yeah. So how did you go from having these small businesses? It sounds like putting that bio and chemistry degree to use. And then deciding to run for Congress. I mean, it sounds like you had a nice living, doing important work. What was the kind of the stimulus for you to say, oh no, I'm going to put myself out there?
You know, I mean, I've said this a lot, but like whenever somebody asks me, and basically my response is, you know, I saw that Ted Yoho was going to retire, and I thought, oh, cool, like somebody's going to go like be able to flip this seat, like that's awesome, like I'm going to go help them because you know I liked politics, like I liked what was going on, and at the same time, I knew a lot of things that needed to be different, especially for small businesses, like with healthcare and benefits and all those kind of things, and I just didn't see anybody who was going to be able to do it. Like both the people that were running on the Democratic side had run before. They'd never gotten more than 2%. And in my head, I was like, all right, well, this is like, it's just not going to happen. And so I basically was complaining to a friend of mine and was like, you know, like, it's like, I can't believe this is happening again. Like every time there's an opportunity to like do something meaningful, somehow it always gets like screwed up and we put up people that aren't going to be able to do it. And in my head, like to that person, I was saying this and they basically looked at me and said, you know, you don't really get to complain about it if you're not going to do something. And I was like, that's fair, I guess. But, you know, I've never even thought about it. Like, how would you get on the ballot? Like, what would that look like? How would you do that? How expensive is it? Like that kind of thing. And then I basically just decided, okay, we'll see what happens. And then it just started growing.
And then how did you nab the nomination? You weren't the only one going for it. What do you think resonated with people?
So we did a couple things that were kind of cool, kind of special. Basically, our entire team was run by people under the age of 23. That was exciting. So we had a huge ground game, huge field operation. Nobody had ever heard of us. Realistically, nobody had ever heard of us. We'd never run before. Both the people who were running against the primary had both run before. They had name recognition. They had more money than us. And we realized we were not going to win the heavily Democratic areas where everybody knew them. We knew that. And so Olathe, University of Florida, Gainesville area, we knew we weren't going to win it. And we knew we had to have a different strategy, a different outlook in order to win the race, the nomination. And so we decided we were going to do something that no Democrat had ever done before. We decided to go out to the rural counties and try to win as much support out in the rural counties where Democrats historically do horribly and see if we could win it there. And we did. We did two things that were historic. Number one, I became the youngest Democratic congressional candidate in the country. And number two, we won the nomination for the Democratic seat without winning the heavily Democratic area. That's never happened before here. And so we ran a general election kind of strategy in the primary, and it paid off. And we ran up the score in all the rural areas and the counties around us that no Democrat ever goes to. We ran up the score there, and it paid off. And so that was how we won there. And it's probably going to be how we win this general election, is we are actually fighting in places Democrats have never gone. We're knocking on doors of people that have not had a Democrat knock on their door in 30, 40 years.
So what's that like when you knock on a door in a rural, traditionally Republican-leaning area, and you say, "Hey, I'm Adam Christensen. I'm running for Congress as a Democrat." I would imagine that there's at least some people who have a very strong perception of what the Democratic Party is. Yeah, right?
Yep. So there's two things. We decided that we were going to flip the script. When we first started running, we were told two things. We were told, number one, you have to go moderate. You have to water down your policies. You're going to scare people.
Mm-hmm.
My response was, okay, I grew up as a Republican and conservative, and any Democrat I have ever known that did that, nobody has any respect for, because they don't believe in anything they're saying. And they're willing to do whatever they want to themselves in order to, win votes. And that's just pandering. And I knew for a fact that Republicans hate that. They just can't stand it. And I was like, if you do that, you will lose. And I was told that I've flat out said that to multiple people. I'm like, I refuse to water down our policies. It's also a lazy way out. If you can't find better marketing or better ways to frame things, then you shouldn't be running in the first place. And so the first thing we did was basically we refused to water down our policies. And number two, we decided we were going to try things a little bit differently. We had a feeling that optics really mattered. And so we decided that we were going to copy all of the marketing, all of the colors of our opponent, who is a Republican. And so in Clay County, which is 80% Republican, we started wearing red shirts with our name on it. We started having red yard signs with our name on it, and giant signs that were red and had the stars and blue and white. It looked very Republican, but we didn't change anything. We didn't change any policies whatsoever. And we basically, if you knocked on a door wearing a blue shirt in Clay County, they would laugh at you. They wouldn't come to the door. They wouldn't even open it. You do it with a red shirt, they will talk to you. And then you can actually have a conversation and you can actually talk to them. And they realize very quickly that you're not a horrible human being. Oh, and also if you show up with a puppy, very excited to talk to you. So that helped a lot. And we kept doing it. And what we kind of started to realize, we went to 3 Trump rallies. We changed nothing about ourselves other than the color of our shirts. And we got great receptions. It's the warmest receptions we've gotten anywhere. And it was simply because we changed the color of our shirt.
What was that? So what's that like when you're either talking to a Trump rally attendee, or you're knocking on a door, you're wearing the red shirt, but at some point they squint and they're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a D there. Or they discover that you're not a registered Republican. What's that kind of transition like?
Well, it's one of those things where, especially in Republican areas, you just be flat out and honest with them. You're like, look, we were the underdogs in our own primary. We had to take on the Democratic establishment. We have not gotten any help from the Democratic Party. And we are doing this in a way that, we want to change the way that things are. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what party you are in. If you don't focus on people, nothing matters. If you're only focused on money and donors and being able to, get as much money as you can for your reelection, you're not fighting for people. And that's what we're going to do. And that's what we are doing. And we also realized very quickly that classically conservative economics and progressive economics are almost identical. You're fighting monopolies. You're going after price fixing. You're going after the biggest companies in the world who are destroying small businesses. And you're doing it in a way that you can actually have a free market again, because we don't have one. And when you start talking about those things, especially with people who've the first doors that we started knocking on were the ones with Donald Trump signs. Most people think people that are Donald Trump supporters will refuse to ever talk to a Democrat. But what we realized very quickly was Donald Trump supporters have already been willing to buck the Republican Party once. They have already been willing to fight against the Republican establishment once. I'm betting they're willing to do it again, and they don't care which establishment it is. And so we started talking, especially to Republicans, in this kind of fashion of, look, we are here to catch fraud. We are here to stop you from getting screwed over. We are here to protect you and make sure that you can actually afford a home, have a family, have money left over. And when you start to put it in those kind of frameworks, you do very well. And on top of that, we are able to successfully talk about the Second Amendment. We are able to talk about all of these actual, classically Republican ideas, but from a progressive frame point, and people are actually okay with it. Not just okay with it, they're like, you know what, I agree with you. And so we really put it based on policy, based on framing, but a lot of it is just marketing and getting over the first hump and the first hurdle of them not thinking you're a horrible human being. And if you get over that, yeah.
if you listen to the president's speeches or his recent debate performance, he will often say, if you vote for the quote unquote Democrat Party, that they will take away they will take away your Second Amendment. You can kiss that goodbye. They're going to destroy your suburbs, and they're going to take away all of your health insurance.
Yep.
How do you? I'm guessing you probably encountered people who've heard and may buy into that. How do you even start to unwind that sort of mess of statements?
Well, you don't. You just start laughing. You'd be like, what? What is that? Like, where did that come from? Like, we had the person I'm running against a week ago claimed that 5 protesters outside of her house waving Green New Deal signs were, quote, Antifa, radical left, coming to intimidate her and get her in her house on a Sunday morning. And this like took off. Like, you had Senator Rand Paul come after me on Twitter, and literally my first reaction to her doing this was posting a video of me just laughing. Just being like, this is the funniest, best thing I've ever seen ever. And I can't believe a real person put this out. Like, you don't treat things like that with any sort of seriousness. Like, you treat it the way it should be treated, which is it's a joke. Don't take it seriously, and don't give ground to it, because the more that people fake outrage, the more people start to think that, maybe I should take this seriously. Maybe this is real. Maybe these Democrats are really this horrible. So if you've seen like on Twitter, like for the past week, I've literally been, because the Gateway Pundit wrote me up and said that I was leading a dangerous band of Democratic street gangs. It makes me sound so cool. Like, I honestly, like, I sound like a badass. Like, that makes me look good. And so for like the last week, like, I've just been making fun of the fact that everywhere we go, those dangerous Democrats are coming to get you, and posting, GIFs of like West Side Story of us just like coming up the streets and stuff. Like, it's just, enjoy it, have fun. Don't take people like that seriously, and don't give them any air to breathe, because when they do, they will take a mile and literally just be like, look, I like somebody once, they go, you're a communist, you admit it. And I looked at somebody else, I go, I feel like I would remember having said that. Do you remember that? And the other person just looked at me and goes, no, I don't remember you saying that. Like, we just started laughing at it. And the other person, like the person who said it to us, just like got embarrassed and like walked off. And it was just like, look, enjoy yourself and be able to talk to people like you're real, be authentic, just be who you are. And that actually goes a long way. And optically, you can appear moderate without changing anything. And that's the biggest things we've learned. And it's crazy to me that nobody has really found this out yet, or really actually tried to put it into practice.
What would you do, Adam, if you got to Congress and you had an opportunity to focus your efforts on a few issues? Like, what matters most to you?
I think there's a couple things. I think really 3 things at this moment, maybe 4 that would be like the top priority. Number 1, obviously Medicare for all, getting rid of the health insurance companies, just getting them out of the system. Like, that's the biggest crossover I have seen from Republicans, is as soon as I mention insurance companies being like, I just want to get rid of them out of the system, they're like, all right, cool. That sounds great. They hate insurance companies. The second thing, obviously, that would remove the burden of healthcare from small businesses. It would allow small businesses to explode and be able to grow past the point that they can now. Universal childcare. It's got an ROI of 1.25. So everything we put in, we're going to get about $1.25 back on it. And so it's a great investment. It would save families about $8,000 a year. So Medicare for all, probably about anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a year for health insurance for a family. Universal childcare, about $8,000 to $10,000 a year, just based on childcare, that they wouldn't have to pay to a private company anymore. So that's almost $18,000 back in people's pockets immediately per year. And then on top of that, I think that we have to implement some sort of emergency UBI. I say about $2,000, just to make sure that, especially till we get through this pandemic, people are able to keep their homes, like able to keep food on the table. And I think it should be retroactive, because we should have implemented it 7 months ago. And then the last thing, that has to have a main focus, I think, is student debt. So predatory loans and predatory debt, it needs to be wiped out. And when you wipe it out, you will see the biggest housing boom the United States has ever seen. You will probably see the biggest economic boom that the United States has ever seen, because people will actually be able to get a mortgage. They'll be able to start a family. Like, we will actually somewhat start to see the American dream come back. And I think if you do all four of those together, it would be the biggest middle class tax cut the United States has ever seen. And it would be phenomenal. And so I think those things in combination would be great.
Those sound like great ideas. How do you win this thing? It seems like that district, Florida's 3rd, has gone kind of reliably Republican for at least the last 10 years, maybe. What are your thoughts on chances of flipping it?
So typically at this point in the election, Democrats are down 15%. We aren't. We are actually neck and neck right now as far as registered Democrats to Republicans. On top of that, we have another 30, 40,000 independents and no party affiliation that have already voted. And so currently the person we're running against is possibly the worst Republican that they have ever put up in any race across the country. Like, it's embarrassing. She faked her entire background, her entire life story. She raised $500,000 by lying to people about being homeless. She got fired by the person who's currently in the seat. And after she was fired, she started receiving more money from him than before she was fired. So something's going on there. She has multiple ethics complaints that have already been filed in Congress against her. And basically she has, it looks like, committed large amounts of incorrect financial transactions through her foundation. And so, yeah, it's number one, you got to make sure that you are running against somebody that not only Democrats can't stand, but everyone can't stand. And you need to make sure that that is very clear to people that, number one, not trustworthy. And number two, like, this person cannot be in charge of your money. It cannot happen. And then on top of that, we had a very cohesive strategy, just kind of like I mentioned with the primary, is we decided that we were going to do something that nobody else had done. And so the way that we did that was basically in Alachua, you have to run up the score. That's the heavily Democratic area at University of Florida. You have to run up the score. And so we realized very quickly that vote by mail ballots and absentee ballots are the way to do that. If you have an absentee or vote by mail ballot, you are almost twice as likely to vote as somebody just going to the poll. So we turned our entire manpower, phone banking, all that to increase the number of vote by mails as much as we could. On top of that, there's about 40 to 50,000 Hispanic and Latino voters in the southeastern part and also northeastern part of our district that neither party has ever talked to. Nobody has ever asked for their vote, and nobody's actually campaigned in any form or fashion to show them that they care. And so that was a big part of our campaign. Is our actual Latino and Hispanic outreach director. Her name is Jackie. She is 19 years old, and she has an entire team of bilingual, basically college students that has been their entire focus. And they have done phenomenal work. And on top of that, you have to win Republicans. You have to be able to come close in places like Clay County and other heavily rural areas. And so the majority of everything that we have done is actually to those areas. Like I mentioned earlier, you change the color of your shirt, they will talk to you. You frame yourself in a way that, you can actually, you hit the things that they care about, and you do it in a way that you are authentic and real, and you didn't water down anything about yourself. And they may not always agree with you, but at least they will respect you. So we have like 4 or 5 different irons in the fire that if any one of them takes off, it's going to be close. If 2 of them take off, we're looking really good. And if 3 or 4 of them take off, we may just see something here we've never seen before. And I think we're flirting between 2 and 3. I hope we get to the 4th. And we'll see. But like I said earlier, the typical year, Democrat to Republican turnout by registered voters is usually Republicans have already blown out Democrats, and there's no way you could ever get past that hole. At this moment, I think that Democrat to Republican, it's like 90,000 to 90,000 almost. And then independents is like 30,000 that have voted so far. So whoever wins independents is probably going to win this race if the Democrats and Republicans stay close, which has never happened before. So we're trying to keep that close. And then we're trying to win independents and even some Republicans. Because if we flip Republicans, it's basically 2 votes. 1, because they're not voting for the person you're against, and 2, because now they're voting for you. So in effect, it is 2 votes. And so that's kind of the base strategy. We have also raised more money than any other person who has run in this area. And basically the entire thing has been small dollar contributions. Our average contribution is $21. And so we have effectively been youth powered and people powered. And that's literally how we've run. We've run it the way we wanted to. And we have not compromised in our beliefs. And that is not something you can really ever say in a congressional race that I know of and be competitive. And so if we pull this off, it will be historic. I will be the youngest person ever elected to Congress. And we will do it in a way that nobody ever saw coming, because there has not been polling here in 2.5 years. That's
a really exciting story. And hopefully it becomes one of the models for the future for other people to kind of bring some new ideas and new faces to Congress.
We'll see.
What was it like getting that Humanity Forward endorsement? What was the process like? And how did you overlap with the Yang Gang?
It was really cool. So number one, Marianne Williamson, came out and endorsed us. Like, she went out on a limb. I'm not gonna lie. Like, she put faith in us when pretty much nobody else would, because I think she saw something. And on top of that, a little while later, Ted Yoho verbally assaulted AOC on the Capitol steps. And that drove a lot of people not only to realize that District 3 was a place, because nobody knew where this place was. They never thought it would ever be in play. But people started to realize that not only was Ted Yoho's seat up because he was retiring, up to be able to be won, but it could be won by a bunch of progressive young people who are running unafraid of anyone. And so at that point, we started to hear more from Andrew Yang from Humanity Forward. And, after a couple talks and, filling out their information and going through the process, he basically said, we love what you're doing. We love the message. We love how you're saying it and why you're saying it. And you know what? We want to back you. And so that was incredible. So I've had quite a few different conversations with Andrew himself, with his team. And then obviously I've also had conversations with Marianne. Like, it's the amount of support that we have gotten from non-traditional areas of support is the only reason where we are. We didn't have the DCCC back us. Like, we didn't have any of these main people back us. And if we win this, number one, will we be unbought? Yes, we will be completely unbought by special interests. And number two, we're going to do it in a way that would be historic. And that makes me incredibly happy. It makes me incredibly excited. And either way, even if we do not win, we have done something here that has never been seen here. And that in and of itself, I think, is special.
Do you think there's a blue wave is the top of the ticket going to help or hurt you? How are you feeling about the Biden-Trump effect on your race?
Don't know. We're running in a heavily Republican area, and not just Republican, but Trump area. And, we've seen previous, like a month ago, it was a huge enthusiasm and just like built up, excitement for Donald Trump. And over the past month, I would say that it has drastically dwindled. It's not very much excitement for Joe Biden, to be honest with you. But at the same time, now we're not seeing the kind of levels of excitement that we saw anywhere else either. So I really don't know. But at the same time, like I said, by early returns, Democrats are fired up and they are ready to compete here. And they are turning out in numbers higher than we've ever seen. And they are putting this race into play. And so whatever the reason is, I'm thankful for it. And I hope it continues. And we will see.
Let's take some audience questions. It looks like Sebastian is curious about beyond the middle class tax cuts. Do you have any thoughts about working class people?
All of these are directed straight to working class people. What we kind of realized very quickly is that this sounds bad, and it is bad, and it's absolutely horrible, but this is the way that things are. When you talk about the poor and when you talk about like the homeless and other people don't take that as seriously as if you talk about the middle class, because nobody wants to admit that they are poor Everybody wants to admit that they are middle class. And so when you talk about the middle class, you are actually talking about far greater than anyone who is actually in the middle class. And so we framed it that way simply because we realized very quickly that people are far more receptive when you talk about the middle class. But the policies that we are pushing would actually help poor, those who are unhoused, people with mental health issues far more than they would ever help anybody else. And so the way to get it through is by talking about the way we do. But at the same time, the biggest push and the biggest help of universal child care, of Medicare for all, would be for the poor and the working class. And basically, you know, like we've said since we started, we believe that if you are working 8 hours a day, you should be able to afford a home, a family, and have money left over. And so all of our policies are directed at that, the working class, and especially those who have never had a fair shake in society and would love to have the American dream. And that is who we are focused on.
Yeah, it looks like the average, the median income in your district is around 42,000, which is probably kind of at just at the bottom edge of middle class. So there's definitely a significant number of people who are for sure.
Union County, it's like $14,000.
Yeah.
It's one of the poorest in the country. And it's got two things in it: phosphate mines and prisons. And that's it. And so, yeah, if you took out Clay County, that number would drop dramatically.
Do you ever talk about basic income? Like, how do people respond to that?
Yeah. My favorite thing that I have heard was, I was actually talking to a Trump Republican about, UBI and just what it means, and the fact that it would actually be a middle-class tax cut because they would be getting money back from the government. And his response was, it'd be nice to get $1,000 a month. I'd be okay with that. That was it. That's usually the response. It's a question of whether or not they bought into the lie that if they receive money, that means that the economy is going to go to shit. There are people that believe that. And the only reason they believe that is because they've been told that over and over again by people who are billionaires and by the biggest companies in the world, that if they get anything past survival, that's actually bad. And we've seen a lot of people start to realize that that is just not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of kind of dogma around economic policy that probably was established like in the early 20th century that has never been challenged. When in reality, the economy has evolved and it doesn't operate in the same way as it once did. Tamar has a question about, and we talked a little bit about this, but maybe you could elaborate on your approach to door to door in the rural areas, and like what are folks, Republicans, open to? Like, of course, you mentioned the optics of showing up in a red shirt, but how does the conversation actually unfold? Like, how do you do it?
It actually goes about it goes just like a normal conversation. It's literally like, they're like, what do you care about? And I'm like, honestly, making sure that people actually have healthcare and they're not like paying too much for insurance, and, making sure you actually have some choice. Like right now, you don't get to choose which hospital you go to or which doctor. Your insurance company does. And you pay 30% more to that. Like 30% of everything you pay goes to that insurance company. And I was like, you remove that, everything's cheaper. And they're like, cool. Right.
Do they ever say, but well, you're a Democrat, you're trying to socialize medicine? Yeah.
No, yeah, we get something like that. And I'm like, I don't think anywhere in my policy plan does it even say socialized medicine. I'm like, literally, we would just be doing what everybody else does and also getting rid of the middlemen. And I literally, when I'm talking about it, I sound more like a Republican than I do anybody else, because this is a conservative idea, right? Removing a middleman from a system that is too expensive and causing price fixing. Does that sound like a Democrat? I don't think it sounds like a Democrat. Does it sound like a radical idea? No, it sounds almost conservative. And so you talk about it in the language that people understand and the language that they are used to, and use their buzzwords. Like I refer to premiums and deductibles as a death tax. You can't pay it, you die. Let's be honest here. So don't let them use words that they've made up to mean whatever they want it to mean. Take those words back. Middle class tax cuts, small business tax cuts, death taxes. Talk to them just like they would talk to themselves or each other, but use your policies in those ways. And if you flip the script on it, the amount, like just the change is drastic. And when people start to realize, and I talk about this a lot, I talk about 2008. Because every single time you bring up 2008, there is a visceral gut reaction of hatred for what happened to them in 2008. And you basically say, look, you paid taxes, you invested in those companies because you were told you had to, and the government had to do it to save them. And they got back on their feet. They did better than ever, but you never got your money back. Everything got more expensive. Healthcare got more expensive. Education got more expensive. And they did better than ever. And yet you never got your money back. So it's time that you actually got a return on the investment that you made because they owe you your money back. And when you frame it like that, and then you say that return could be healthcare, that return could be universal childcare, that return could be all these other things, they're like, no, that makes sense. I want my money back. Okay, I'll do that. That sounds good.
What about if someone asked you, aren't you going to take away my guns?
This is a fun one. I enjoy this one. So the crazy thing about this is obviously guns have been like a very Republican centered, this is my main talking point. It's Trump, gods, guns, abortion. Like that's it. That's the entire platform. It's the cookie cutter response to running for Congress in this area. And for us, we take that right back. Like, number one, we support the Second Amendment, but what Kat Kamik supports, that's not the Second Amendment. She basically wants anyone to do whatever they want with any sort of gun at any point in time. Good guys, sure, they should have guns. We need to make sure they can. Bad guys, we need to make sure we do everything we possibly can to make sure that they don't get them. And on top of that, we actually support making sure that we have licensed and actual responsible gun owners instead of just random people who have no idea what they're doing, endangering other people's lives. And so we frame it as we are actually pro-Second Amendment and we are actually responsible gun owners and we are actually focused on policies that make sure that happens. And they're not. They're just irresponsible. And they want irresponsible people to get guns and endanger everybody else.
Well, Adam, it sounds like you are very well equipped to de-escalate a lot of the kind of Twitter sparring and just get down to solutions and trying to be reasonable.
Did you see? I was on another show and they had Corona Katie, I think her name was, the girl who became famous for going to Red Lobster at the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh boy.
And like freaking out. Well, she was like, basically her argument was we shouldn't take a deadly virus seriously because cars kill people. And my response was basically that, we don't hand people alcohol, get them drunk, and then go tell them to drive around. So stop wasting my time. Basically, I just started laughing at her because I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Like, it's hysterical that you would even, that would come out of your mouth because it's so dumb. Like, you need to treat these kind of arguments, bad faith arguments, the way that they are. They're bad faith. They have no idea what they're talking about. And you just got to laugh at them because they're dumb.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really kind of intriguing angle. I guess I've always tried to reason with unreasonable arguments, but it sounds like that doesn't. That may not be the best path forward for certainly you think there's a better way.
It's emotion. Well, that's the thing. I think that's one reason that Democrats have done so poorly for years is we try to reason and think our way out of things instead of actually attaching to the emotion behind it. A lot of times people, they get dug in based on a feeling or a gut feeling as opposed to, this makes logical sense. Or, if I just read through the policy, I'll understand. Progressives have had the best ideas for years, and yet they have not been able to get them through. And the reason is not that they are not the best ideas. It's the same way in business. Like the companies that I work with, the best products do not win, ever. The ones that have the best marketing, the best distribution, and the best branding, those are the ones that win, even if they're fake, even if they're fraudulent. I test some of the best companies' products in the world, and 60% of the time, those products are fake. And yet, they are considered the best and the most expensive and the most luxurious, and they are not. It's marketing, it's branding, it's emotion, and if you do not tap into that and you do not fix that first and foremost, the policies that we know will work, the policies that we love, the things that we actually believe in, they will not happen. And that has to be a change. Republicans have done that for years.
Last question from the audience before we wrap up, Adam. Sebastian says, hey, so you talked about the jobs being prison and mining. What's your take on private prisons? What would you tell people who would say, hey, that's how my dad makes his living? He works in that industry.
Yeah. So number one, private prisons need to go. There should not be a financial incentive to lock up as many people as possible, because that just hurts your community. I mean, any company that is designed on exploiting or extorting your community, it's got to go. When we talk about the phosphate mines, that phosphate mine right now is suing the county of Union County for $250 million. The county itself's annual budget is $7 million. If that phosphate mine wins that suit, it will wipe Union County off the face of the map. Every single person will lose a huge chunk of their community and most of the jobs. And so that phosphate mine that we are talking about right now is extorting and blackmailing an entire population in Florida that has zero political power and is too poor to fight back. On top of that, it is poisoning the land. It is poisoning basically all the job opportunities that are in that county. If you remove the phosphate mine, guess what happens? People have to find an alternative to phosphate fertilizer, at which point we can implement carbon farming pilot programs, and we can bring back small family-owned farms onto the land that is no longer poisoned, and we can actually have small businesses that grow and expand instead of getting sucked up and destroyed. And so, yes, your dad may lose his job from being underpaid at a phosphate mine that is destroying the place that he lives in his community, but he will be able to find something so much better once we are able to transition and remove them from the system. And more than likely, he will be able to own his own small business. He will be able to take his own life back, work his own hours, and actually have freedom and be able to grow and live in a community that is valued. And if you have a company in that community that does not value the community and the money flows out instead of in, it should not be there. And we need to fight back against it because it does more harm than good.
Yeah, I wonder if this is where a UBI would also help kind of that transition, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we often talk during the Yang campaign about the UBI because of jobs lost to automation, but there also may be job changes due to environmental protections and things like that. And if you had a UBI, then it would give people some time,
security
to make that, that floor.
Stability. Like literally you would have the ability to find a new job, and you would not be worrying about being out on the street or being able to provide food. That is what we were talking about, is nobody should be desperate enough to take a job that they have no way out of.
Mm-hmm. Adam, great stuff, man. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us, or any message you want to give to the audience out there, before we wrap up?
No, I'm good. I mean, we got 9 days left. We are doing everything we possibly can. We need the last final push over the line. If we raise another $20,000, I think this race is over. I really do. We are trying to do everything as far as fulfilling our budgets for media. Our entire campaign has been geared around what is the most effective and efficient ways in order to run a campaign. And we have done that. Our opponent has almost spent $1 million on this race. That is more than any Republican ever has spent on this race. And we have forced her to do that. And we have done it with 1/10 the amount of money. And so we have actually raised more than anybody else has in this area ever. And we've done it through small dollar contributions. And we are within the margin of error, and we know that. And right now, the last final push could put us over the edge, at which point we do something historic and we flip a +9 Republican district in the heart of Trump country with young progressives who refuse to capitulate or change what they believe. That story alone is game changing. And we have rewritten the way that you can run in a rural area and be true to yourself. And so for us, if you can help us out, our website is forthemany.com. And then obviously you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, whatever you need to do. And like I said, we're almost there. And either way, in 9 days, I will be able to sleep again. Very excited about that, as is everyone. But yeah, that's about it.
All right, man. Well, best of luck to you. I got a feeling that you might surprise some people, and I think that'll be fantastic. It could be the beginning of a a new era in how people run for Congress and where people are willing to run and how they reach out and connect with people who aren't traditionally Democrat voters in a way that's been, that will be more effective than just kind of throwing like a bunch of policies at them.
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of realized is typically nobody ever actually tries to win the other side. They just try to hold on to their supporters and maybe win a couple of independents or people in the middle, but they never actually pour any amount of resources or even really try to bring other people along, because if you flip somebody in somebody else's base, that is a huge deal. And it is so much better for you and like campaigning wise. And so it's been interesting to me to see if our strategy pays off, because I have a feeling it has, but I need to know.
Yeah.
We'll know in 9 days if it worked, how effective it was, anything like that.
I'd love to get you back a few weeks from now.
Sure.
Whatever happens, so that
Yeah.
we can sort of do a retrospective and figure out, okay, what worked, what didn't work. And hopefully we'll be asking you like, what are you going to be doing when you get to DC?
That's the goal. We will see. No, I'd love to. It'd be a lot of fun. So,
all right. Awesome, Adam. Hey, give them hell out there. Good luck in the last 9 days. And everybody check out the forthemany.notjustme.com website. Follow Adam and see if you want to be part of making history.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.